Dear friends, welcome back to my channel, Courtroom Battles. My name is Dr. TUSHAR MANDLEKAR and I have created this channel, Courtroom Battles, for the benefit of young lawyers and aspiring lawyers. And we are discussing various case laws as well as the provisions of the law in this channel. Dear friends, today we are going to discuss the very hot topic in this country, which every lawyer is thinking, that whether judges of the constitutional courts are crossing their limits, whether the courts are virtually running the government of the day, whether unelected judges are in fact running this country. Dear friends, every modern democracy has three branches of government: legislature, which debates and passes the laws; executive, which implements laws and general measures of governance; and judiciary, which interprets laws in disputes brought before it as well as decides on the constitutionality of those laws, occasionally striking them down. The constitutional courts have their functions by which they can strike down the laws made by the parliament. The constitutional courts can also decide the disputes between the parties as well as the matters and petitions against the government, so that no one branch has unbridled and unchecked power, as well as to avoid the three branches from invading each other's domains. The principles of separation of powers has emerged. If the parliament, for example, passes a law which is patently unconstitutional, a court can always strike it down. If the executive takes an action which is illegal in nature, then the courts can do the balancing act and correct that action. What happens, dear friends, when our courts ride roughshod over matters for which people of this country, the voters, have elected a government? What happens when actions taken by the government aren't held to be unconstitutional or illegal pursuant to any sound judicial rationale and analysis, but in fact the court imposes its will on a body elected to serve the will of the people? There are two crucial words in the principle of separation of powers. What courts seem to have focused on lately in the last word therein, power. The courts, in fact, are taking power into their hands. That is what many activists feel. What is conveniently overlooked in the flurry of headline-making orders, judgments, or observations is separation. Whether exactly there is a separation of power or not, that is required to be seen. Moreover, the judges of the High Courts and the Supreme Court are unelected. It is the job of the elected government to create infrastructure for the people. In a welfare state, the government has to do certain acts for the benefit of the people at large. The creation of the infrastructure, construction of the dam, buildings, providing school, education, medical facilities, everything is the fundamental job of the elected government. Elected government has the task to create infrastructure and do welfare of the citizens of this country. In a crisis like COVID-19 pandemic, dear friends, we have seen industries are closed, there is a lockdown, people are losing their jobs, and everybody is struggling to save life. There is a large economic impact of COVID-19 in this country. While there may have been an overwhelming majority in favor of the lockdowns, an individual's right to livelihood has also been compromised. These decisions indeed aren't easy and have to be taken on the basis of the larger good, which again can be argued in multiple different ways. The efficacy, competency, and alacrity of elected governments to these competing interests is precisely what determines whether they stay in power in the next elections. We have seen in pandemic times, elections are happening everywhere. We have seen elections in Bengal, Assam, Tamil Nadu, everywhere the election commission is conducting the elections. Irrespective of the fact that whether the common citizen is facing pandemic COVID-19 or not. The elections are happening. So the governments are changing. State governments or the central government has to take some stringent decision to control the COVID-19 crisis. We have seen lockdown orders were passed and people have lost their jobs. Migrant laborers have lost their jobs and gone to their native places. They were walking for hundreds of kilometers and there was no one to help them out. The bigger question here is, why does the judiciary steps into the shoes of the executive or the elected government? We have seen it is difficult for the elected government to take tough measures to control the pandemic. We have also seen that the governments have failed to protect the fundamental rights of the citizens, either to give them medical facilities or to give them jobs or a livelihood. In order to save people from the COVID-19 crisis, very strict actions and stringent measures were taken by the government. We have not seen that the courts have struck down those decisions or the decision to lock down. But at the same time, when the governments have failed to control the crisis of the COVID-19 or to give medical facilities to the citizens in this country, the courts have stepped into. That is precisely what the Allahabad High Court stepped in when it effectively acted as the principal opposition party, criticizing the state of the medical emergency in the Uttar Pradesh in order to safeguard the public interest. Allahabad High Court was hearing a public interest litigation, a tool that has been largely deviated from its original purpose to provide legal justice to the socially disadvantaged people. But the judgment of the Allahabad High Court, by which the shutdown or lockdown was imposed in 5 major cities, has severely impacted the right of the elected government to take such decisions. The Allahabad High Court effectively ordered shutting down establishments, malls, stores, hotels, restaurants and educational institutions until 26th of April 2021 in 5 major cities. The hawkers we referred earlier is only allowed to operate until 11 am. The High Court also added that there is a threat of the complete lockdown. Dear friends, the said judgment of the Allahabad High Court was stayed by the Honorable Supreme Court. It was argued that the Allahabad High Court had stepped virtually into the shoes of the elected government. It is the right of the elected government to decide the matters related to the lockdown orders or the welfare measures which are required to be taken in the interest of the public at large. Similarly, in Telangana, we have seen that the Telangana High Court directed the Telangana government to issue COVID-19 guidelines to minimize footfalls in the stores, restaurants, marriage halls, cinemas and other crowded places, indicating that it would pass appropriate orders in the next hearing. No provision of the Constitution was relied upon for these directions, and the critics have severely criticized this judgment. No interpretation of the law, quite simply an expression of their will by the unelected lordship. Indeed, nothing to say about the fact that millions of cases involving parties with actual legal disputes which need interpretation of the law remain pending in the courts throughout the country. Dear friends, even the Madhya Pradesh High Court gave lot of directions on 19th of April 2021 in a suo motu public interest litigation to control the COVID-19 crisis in the state of Madhya Pradesh. Some of the directions were as below. The state government was directed to ensure that continuous and regular supply of the oxygen and REMDESIVR should be made available to the hospitals and private nursing homes. The state government was also directed to control all infrastructure in the government medical hospitals as well as the private medical hospitals. The state government was directed to considering the strengthening of the city hospitals as well as the government hospitals and also have the equipments related to the COVID-19 pandemic. The government was directed to ensure that the medical relief is given to the common man as well as a person who is admitted into a private hospital. The state government was further directed to control the rates of the testing of the COVID-19. Dear friends, several directions were given by the Madhya Pradesh High Court to the government of the Madhya Pradesh. The toll-free number was also directed to be started. These are all things which are required to be done by the governments. We have seen that most of the governments and most of the cities, they do not have the basic facilities like conducting of the RT-PCR test for the COVID-19. We have also seen that rural India do not even have the facilities of the HRCT scan, the pathology laboratories or the radiology laboratories. We have also seen that in this country, even major cities like Nagpur do not have the enough REMDESIVR injections, the oxygen or the ventilator beds available as on today. Therefore, the Bombay High Court Nagpur bench has also stepped into and issued several directions into the suo motu petition yesterday. Even the High Court had to give the direction to the state government of Maharashtra to procure, secure and provide 10,000 REMDESIVR injections in the city of Nagpur, wherein it is found and observed that in last 3 days, not single injection of REMDESIVR was supplied to the citizens in Nagpur. So Bombay High Court has stepped into, Madhya Pradesh High Court has stepped into, Gujarat High Court has stepped into, Telangana High Court has stepped into, Allahabad High Court has stepped into, Karnataka High Court has stepped into. So as many as 7 high courts are virtually giving directions to control the COVID-19 situation in this country. So dear friends, if we consider the powers of the state governments, are they not supposed to provide all these facilities to the citizens? Are the state governments not competent to give RT-PCR testing facilities? Is it not the responsibility of the state governments to give the REMDESIVR injection, life-saving drugs and the oxygen? The basic lack of infrastructure and the medical facilities has in fact resulted in violation of the fundamental rights of the citizens in this country. Right to life, which has been enunciated under Article 21 of the Constitution of India, has been openly violated. Citizens are struggling to save their own lives. In spite of having paid huge amount to the hospitals, citizens are not getting oxygen and REMDESIVR injections. Dear friends, as per Article 47, the government is duty bound to provide facilities and infrastructure for the protection of the life and health of the citizens of this country. But failure of the governments has undoubtedly resulted High Court stepping into the shoes of the executive and passing several directions and compelling them to provide infrastructure to the citizens. Dear friends, according to my humble view, the courts are not in fact stepping into the shoes of the executive, but courts are doing a yeoman job, a very good job, for protection of the fundamental rights of the citizens, to save the life of the citizens. The courts have passed such directions. The Article 226 of the Constitution of India undoubtedly gives unbridled powers to the High Courts in this country. But at the same time, those powers are judiciously used. No doubt true that several directions are issued by the High Courts in this pandemic time. But I strongly believe that those directions were necessary as the governments have failed in their respective jurisdiction. It is the duty of the elected government to safeguard the life of the citizens. It is the duty of the elected government to also provide infrastructure, basic facilities and healthcare facilities to the citizens in pandemic time. The High Courts have rightly come heavily on these governments and passed several directions. After watching the situation carefully, the courts have come to the conclusion that the state governments are not doing enough to protect the life of the citizens. Therefore, I strongly believe that such an activist approach on the part of the High Courts is justifies as on today for the protection of the life of the citizens in COVID-19 times. Dear friends, what do you feel about this? whether the courts are really encroaching upon the executive as on today, whether the courts have taken over the government, whether the unelected my-lords are virtually running the government. No, my personal opinion is they are protecting the fundamental rights of the citizens. Kindly give your comment in the comment box. If you have liked this video, please share this video with your friends and family, and please subscribe my channel. Thank you so much. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.